Welcome to Fields of Change, an audio video series brought to you by the Foundation for Agrarian Studies. In the lead up to the FAS International Conference on Agrarian Change to be held from November 6 to 9, 2025 in Trivandrum, Kerala, India, we bring you conversations with leading scholars on major themes around agrarian change, including land and labor, rural living standards, science and technology in agriculture, and the impact of climate change. In part 4b, we continue the conversation on climate change and agriculture with Professor T. Jayaraman, exploring how adaptation and mitigation efforts impact agriculture, especially the livelihoods of small farmers. The terms adaptation and mitigation are often used in climate discussions. How do these two approaches apply to agriculture, and why is it important to distinguish between them?
It is true that the practice of agriculture involves greenhouse gas emissions in various ways. So one of the primary ways that affects almost all crops of any kind is the use of nitrogenous fertilizer, which converts to nitrous oxide, which is a greenhouse gas. The other, which is particular to paddy, is the presence of submerged vegetation when paddy is flooded. This is in flooded paddy cultivation. This leads to methane emission, and methane is also a greenhouse gas. Livestock is another major sector where enteric fermentation and the manure management, etc., are sources of GHG emissions. So cutting down emissions eventually is a necessity. But I think it is also true that given that cropping and livestock are the foundations of our sustenance, of our physical well-being, let alone other more subtle economic forms. Sheer physical well-being, since it requires food, then whether crop production is affected by rising temperatures and all the consequent effects, and how do we cope with that rising temperature to make sure that we can maintain enough agriculture production to feed the world, is the subject of adaptation. So you have to have a balance. So unfortunately, because climate change is also a political subject, so the choice between adaptation and mitigation, how much should countries do? Which country should do how much of what? These are important questions. And so there are issues of climate justice, of equity, of the principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities, all of which must be applied to understanding this question. And in India, I would say that we must experiment, we must study mitigation in the agriculture sector, but our foremost and key concern, especially given the millions of households which are dependent on this sector, our primary challenge, I would believe, still remains adaptation.
In recent years, there has been a strong push towards climate change mitigation in agriculture. How is this affecting small farmers, especially in terms of productivity, income, and livelihood security?
So I think I would say at the moment there is not, I would say, a direct impact that this discussion about mitigation in agriculture is not something which is directly affecting small farmers. But the danger, I think, is that adaptation in agriculture, particularly for the huge section of small, marginal, medium, even reasonable, somewhat well-to-do farmers, would require public funding. and it is not something which can happen without public resources. So the idea that somehow you must do mitigation, and attached to it comes the idea of carbon trading, uh, that results in what I would say somewhat taking away of the perspective from public resources for supporting and developing the interests of small farmers. The second problem is that in this process of focusing on mitigation, that not only carbon trading, but you think farmers will somehow, if you push farmers towards practices that are to do with mitigation, which reduce greenhouse gas emissions. For instance, in paddy, you try to persuade them to not transplant nurseries, etc., but to take direct seeding of rice, or what they call alternate wetting and drying, or system of rice intensification, all these methods. But you try to persuade them, yes, you must do it, etc. You give incentives. But what if they do not provide the growth in yield which is necessary? So farmers need rising productivity, the country needs rising productivity. And so it is possible that mitigation method actually cause what is politely called the yield penalty. So then farmers won't take it up. Punjab, for instance, has introduced direct seeding of rice. Well, they also have a problem of overdrawal of groundwater. So we can see where the motivation comes from. But we must, I think, monitor this very carefully and see how this affects farmers. And if there is any decline in productivity and production as a result of promoting mitigation techniques, then the small and marginal farmers would be among the seriously affected quite immediately.